Hello everyone and welcome to this episode, the content one of the Women Talking About Learning podcast. I'm Andrew Jacobs. In the ever-changing world of learning and development, one element remains central to learning experiences, and that's content. To look at this, we have a group of 4 dynamic women from various backgrounds who've come together to discuss the challenges and opportunities that arise in this space. As they share their insights, it does become clear that the future of content lies in human-centered approaches that prioritise the needs of learners. To discuss this, our first guest is Gaynor Aitken. Gaynor has been working in L&D for over 25 years, specialising in systems training. Currently working as a learning solutions lead for an international shipping management company as the L&D project manager, she gets the opportunity to make a demonstrable impact on L&D and wider business. Our second guest is Karen Curitan. After working in sales and marketing for over 20 years, Karen was an early adopter of social media. As soon as it emerged, she embraced it with open arms. Roll forward to today, and she's become a results-driven social media specialist. Karen's been helping businesses for over a decade with proven strategies for success, and her aim is to unpick the often complex world of algorithms and analytics and share her expertise. Next, we have Catherine, or Katie, Swandale. Katie is currently working at Immediate as Senior Learning and Development Partner and has over a decade of experience in designing and delivering strategically aligned experiential learning. Katie began her career in teaching before moving into apprenticeships and developing leadership and management qualifications, including collaborations with the CIPD to help shape HR and L&D qualifications at all levels. Recognised for her impact with awards in company collaboration and business transformation, Katie champions inclusive real-world learning that empowers individuals and drives organisational success, moving beyond traditional models. Our final guest is Laura Giles. Laura is Head of Learning at Desk, managing learning design activity across sales, marketing and production. She's been creating meaningful learning experiences for global brands, the public sector and higher education since 2009. As well as a postgraduate certificate in teaching and learning, she's a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy. She admits to being slightly obsessed with storytelling and wants to get out of her comfort zone, and this is why she's done the podcast. Recorded at the end of March of 2025, this is Women Talking About Learning. This is Gaynor, Karen, Katie and Laura talking about content.
Hi everyone, how are we today? Laura, how are you today?
Oh, great. Thanks, Gaynor. I'm good, really good. How are you, Katie?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm excited to be here and speak with you all. And Karen, how are you?
Great. Absolutely great. It's been a crazy week, but great. And lovely to be with all these incredible women.
Absolutely. So why do we want to speak about content? Why is that of interest to us? Maybe that's our passion. And it's interesting that we're all coming from somewhere slightly different with this, which I think is really interesting. So, Karen, maybe just coming to you, because I know your interest is really sort of social media.
And I think I actually was at an event yesterday and they had some speakers flew in from the States. And what was really interesting is I really like to mix content up. I think when you're learning, you need to keep the learning experience really moving along. And I think there's nothing worse than sitting in front of a screen, especially if you're doing remote learning, and you're looking at it and you're going, oh my Lord, how long is this going on for? And so I try and mix it with as far as social media content's concerned. I'll say to people, think of and this could be the same for workshops or anything, but actually as far as social media is concerned as a topic, I think of your news feed like a really interesting magazine in your subject matter. And when we're talking about learning, we should think like that as well. I think, that people get I work with a lot of coaches and trainers who are paralyzed by procrastination. And I think, it's that's where we tend to come from is we get that chimp on our shoulder going, oh, you shouldn't be saying that. And then what do I say? What are people going to say if I say this? Now write this, and what's the response going to be? Does anybody else think that?
Yeah, it feels for me like everyone has an opinion on everything. And sometimes you see some things on social media and think, I think I'm just going to back away from that slowly. But yeah, Laura, what about you? Okay.
I'm interested to learn from you guys about social media content. My background is really in learning content. I've been working with learning content in one way or another since the beginning of my career. Back in the days of full screen flash animations and page turning e-learning. And since then, I've sort of turned my hand to all types of learning content, whether that be games or simulations or videos or animations. And more recently, in my role as head of learning at Desk, I've been turning my hand to social media content and marketing and sales content. So really, my career has been about content. So I'm quite opinionated about it, but I'm really interested to hear how our perspectives sort of align. How about you, Katie?
Yeah, I think that it'll be really interesting hearing from all of you, all of your experiences. From what I can share is the thought that L&D content or content that is related to L&D is quite out of our hands now. And at the company I work at Immediate, which is a multi-platform media company. We have brands like Radio Times, Good Food, Gardener's World. And because of that, we've really tried to seek the opportunity inside the variety of the new content landscape. So, yeah, I'm excited to share some opportunities that my team and the department I work in have really found, but also hear from all of you as to what you found and inside the opportunity of the new content landscape.
Yeah, it feels like for me, I mean, I've been doing this job for longer than I want to admit, and it's been an interesting. It's an interesting time, I think, to be in learning and development because there have been so many changes. And Laura, I was kind of laughing internally when you're talking about the sort of the click next to page turn e-learning. I mean, I've been about since kind of almost before e-learning was a thing. It was just it was one of those buzzwords that nobody really kind of, I suppose, a little way like AI is now. It was like, yeah, there's an opportunity here, but what do we do with it? And I do think we go through that journey of, initially it's like it's really, really bad, and then it's not so bad, and then it finds its place within the blend. I think again, Karen, I agree with what you're saying. It's like it's that mix of things. It just becomes almost like a toolkit that it's how you use that in different situations. Is that do other people have that sort of experiences?
I think like Gaynor, I remember forever ago, showing my age. Do you remember, Gaynor, you might remember this. I don't know. I'm not putting an age on anybody. Can I just get that out the way? You
We're not
know,
being ageist, no.
not being ageist
Ex-
is
Experiencist.
I think one of the very, I had a career in sales for like 25, 30 years. And I remember when the first training course we went on, it was a video, yes, a video and it was John Cleese. He did a whole series of training videos.
I
That was
remember
my
that.
Do you remember? They
Yeah.
were just they were hysterical. They were so funny. And now, the way that content I was on ChatGPT on Tuesday, and I put because I was mixing things up because I'm always interested in dipping a toe and exploring things. And I asked ChatGPT to create an anime version of my headshot. And it was like, oh my Lord. Do you think though, girls, that there's a sense of overwhelm now that we can just, I was at this event yesterday and it got to 3 o'clock and we'd had some incredible speakers. It was really good. The content was interesting. Speakers were really good. But actually, it was all pretty much it was all guys. Sorry, I'm going to say that. It was all
Hmm.
guys standing up, basically lecturing us. Now, as a learning experience for me as a woman who takes on information in lots of different ways, as learners do, I think it's really important, that it was a great event, don't get me wrong, but how much of that have I retained for my personal learning? How do you feel when you're learning something new?
For me, I think, I mean, I'm I think as people in L&D, women or whoever, you need to walk the walk. You need to be doing these courses, doing social learning, and continuing to learn yourself. I think it's difficult to tell other people, you do as I say, not do as I do. So I've done courses and things online. I think Rise is a really interesting product. I'm not promoting it or anything, but it's in terms of, it's really easy for me to create content, but it's also really easy for anyone to create content. And lots of people in my business who they're not trainers, they're not in L&D or anything, but they have a Rise account and they're creating that content. So it then becomes, I think, whether it's democratizing the content in a way which is a good thing, but then who's monitoring the quality of that? And I think maybe as L&D that there's a slight change in the role that we have in terms of we're not always going to be creating the content, but maybe we should be curating it and making sure that it's in line with our policies, our procedures, and also that it's accurate, because there's a lot of stuff out there that I know for a fact is just wrong.
I totally agree, Gaynor. And it's interesting, even Karen, I sort of underlined the word overwhelm in my notepad there as you said it, because I do think the industry has a content problem.
hmm
I feel like for many learning professionals, they feel like that is what they do. They're content creators. Um, and I think it's been really interesting to observe more of a direction towards learning experience design and the designing of the experience of learning rather than the content of learning. But I know for myself, I do feel in a tricky position sometimes because our clients come to us for a learning product, which is often content. So you feel that that's how you're delivering the value for money is in some content. And perhaps they might not readily see the value in the design of the experience, particularly if it's around the learner themselves having to do more of the work, more of the active learning principles. So you've designed this experience for them, but are they getting kind of less for their money because it's not 45 minutes of content?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. We've kind of moved in a similar span of looking at the experience. So I think, Laura, what you were just saying about all of that, and even Gaynor and Karen having those experiences and putting that as the forefront, playing around with different things, is really a backbone of how we're looking at L&D in playing around with different opportunities. So um, the things that we're doing are doing quite multi-touch point opportunity. There's so much content out there that we're helping our employees, one, embrace the variety of content, but also thinking about what they want to take away for themselves, what lines up to what their interests are, and not being overly prescriptive, even about the learning experience. Yes, putting the right people in the right places. So having speakers, having videos and comms from videoing our own internal employees, sharing different learnings that they've had. Um, we've done unstructured experimentation days, so some pre-training about the tools and then just letting people focus and play. But all of those experiences are so tailored to the individual. They get out of it whatever they want to get out of it. And I think that experience is really interesting. The takeaway from that is really interesting as to what they go on to do with it. We've had projects come out from these different experimentation days that we likely wouldn't have had before. We've had a massive uptake in experimenting and playing with AI. And I think that's been really interesting. So yeah, I feel that L&D taking a bit of a step back and embracing that there's already such a wide variety of content created by multiple people is a good thing and a great opportunity. I guess my thought on it is, what else can we do to harness the greater freedom that L&D might have now? So we've tried to be a bit more strategic. So we put our energy more into really analyzing strategy. But how can we make sure that L&D are embracing this? And kind of what you guys were saying, also being aware of that burnout.
Yeah, because there is a lot of that, isn't there? I think when you put yourself I think one of the things I always try and do is I used to deliver sales training. I was a sales trainer back in the day when I used to work and had a grown up job. And I used to put myself in the learner's shoes and think, is this a stimulating process? And how can we make it better? Because I think, because like you say, we've talked about overwhelm quite a lot, and having that strategy that you talk about, Katie, I think is fantastic because it's so easy, I think, for organizations to stay stuck and not move forward. And that's like everything in life, isn't it? I think, we're in an exciting time with lots of tools, but it's how we utilize those.
Yeah, is it almost like allowing space for people to make mistake a safe space for people to make mistakes? It's like I think mistakes sometimes are we don't want mistakes. Everyone has to be perfect first time round. But actually, it's when you make a mistake that is probably the greatest learning opportunity for all of us. And if we're able to sort of put that in somewhere safe that it's not going to actually have an impact on the bottom line of an organization, then maybe that's something to look to incorporate more of.
That's definitely the culture that we've been trying to instill, and I think that a huge part of that is L&D role modeling as well, and being agile and saying, "Oh, is this working? Do we need to pivot?" Playing with different ideas. And then, so for example, our Summer of Learning initiative, we did it once. We built on an iteration. We're doing an iteration again this year. So challenging ourselves to not get stuck, showing that we're not afraid of failure. Talking our LT as well is really on board with talking about risks that they've taken, things that they've learned from great failures, talking about things in that
Yeah.
way. I love the phrase talking about what you've unlearned recently. That's
Mhm.
such a great thing to
Love
talk
that.
about, especially with AI
Mm.
and things that you've unlearned in your opinion of AI, or how to do something in a different way. So you've learned a new way and unlearned another one. Yeah, I think that those are really interesting.
I think that's a
Yeah.
really good point. I was at an event a couple of weeks back and there was a bunch of entrepreneurs hosting a panel. And one of the questions they asked was, what mistakes did you wish you hadn't made? And it's just reiterated and remind me, Katie, exactly what you've just said. It is that fail first attempt in learning. I actually put that out on my socials quite a lot. It's just go for it because it's not a fail. You're giving it a go. But all of these entrepreneurs all said, and they were across multiple demographics, I wish I'd made more mistakes because, like you said, Gaynor, you know, we learn in lots of different ways, but when we've made a mistake, that's the one that sticks.
Yeah, the very first time I did a webinar with I think it was WebEx back in the day, I made the mistake of keeping like allowing everyone to have their audio on. So it was like there was like 50 people and they all had their audio on, and I only made that mistake once and never never did it again.
So
That's
it
my
really
my my
feels
big.
that Sorry. It really feels that in answer to the question that you posed, Katie, what's the opportunity that we can harness from there being so much content available? It feels like the answer in what you guys are saying is that freedom to experiment. If as learning designers we're not having to spend so much time creating content, which is traditionally where so much of our role has been positioned, it frees up the time to experiment, to fail, to get engaged with the learning science instead of just a traditional content creator.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's less about the learning objective and more about the opportunity presented. 'Cause we have no control over whether someone really does meet a learning objective.
Yeah.
Like, even if you strapped them to a chair and we said, "We're going to learn this, and you're gonna read every book,"
Yeah.
that's not something that is going to then transform into their actions and lead on. We know from a lot of psychology and neurology that experience and having an experience cements it deeper into our memory. And the ones that really stick are when we have a personal connection. So I really believe in, yes, putting on even, the standard, I'm going to do air quotes, of corporate training sessions, putting those on, but inside everything, not being so prescriptive of this is what you are going to learn. It's more, these are the topics we're going to cover, and let's talk about what you connect with and why and how you're going to take it forwards. And I really love talking about potential mistakes that you might make and how great that will be. I saw a really good meme the other day that said, go out today and make 3 mistakes and celebrate them. I can't
Yeah.
remember what it said, like celebrate them ruthlessly or something like
Yeah.
that. And I thought that's so great. Imagine ending on a training and saying, okay,
Go
go
on.
out and make 3 mistakes with the things you've learned,
I love that.
rather than what are you going to do and what are you going to do well?
Oh, I love
And what
that.
are you going to get wrong from this?
Yeah. But I think as well, it's like maybe we have that mindset when we've all been to school in a particular time period, and it's like there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's like you read a book and you start a book at the beginning. I remember someone a few years ago saying to me that they looked at MOOCs and massive open online courses, and they only took from them what they want. They didn't necessarily finish them all, and that blew my mind. It's like, what you mean? I don't have to like go through the whole thing, and it's like that was like just a light bulb moment for me. It's like we can create the content, but it's up to the learner or the employee to use that in the way that they want. So I kind of think of it as more like a pick and mix. It's like they can pick and mix that. And again, maybe our role is partly to create a pathway through that and say, you can look at this, you can look at that, and in some LMSs you can actually have. I've created pathways before where it's like, there's maybe a video of this, or there's some notes on it, or you can pick what you want, and either of those will fulfill the criteria that you've done that. And again, it fulfills both the needs of a business, and also for the learner as well.
Don't you think?
Um,
Sorry, I was just going to say, don't you think there's also that element, and you put it perfectly, Katie, which is they're all individuals and they need to be treated individually. And
yeah,
I was running some training last year, 2 cohorts, and we regrouped in the autumn, and I said to everybody, "How's everybody getting along? How are you getting on with your social media training? What results are you achieving?" And one of the members, given that I was using all of my information to watch what they were up to, said, "Oh, I'm not really getting any results. I'm not really doing anything." So I said, "Well, have you had done a content audit?" She went, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, because I knew what she was doing." And I said, "Go out and have a look. How much of your content is building relationships? How much of your content is making your future customers feel as though you're the right fit for them? How much of your content is educating them, social proofing?" I said, "Look at the last 10 posts you put on FaceAche, as I call it, and come back to me and tell me how many of them were different categories." I gave her about 6 or 7 different categories. She came back and I knew the answer. She says, "Oh my goodness, they're all sales posts." I said, "Okay, so if I went into a shop and somebody just kept selling, 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 do you think I would buy from them?" She said, "Well, of course not." And and sometimes it's those, and she's one of my learners. Everybody's been given the same information. It's how they then take it and use that information, isn't it? Because and as you say quite rightly, Gaynor, is let's give people different ways of doing it. So I'm always shifting how I deliver my learning, because they're all gonna take what they choose to take in that moment, aren't they? Do you think that's the case, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say, as a former MOOC maker, again, that story of the person taking exactly what they need from the learning content really spoke to me, because the completion rates on MOOCs are terrible, and if that was a success metric for us, I don't think we would have continued to make MOOCs. But I love to hear that story of somebody's gone into a course, they've taken the information, they've had the experience that they want, and then that's enough. They've put it back down again. Um, which it just makes me think a little bit about the data behind the content that we produce and what that tells us. And you there, Karen, speaking about looking at the types of content you're putting out and what's the traction of the engagement on those different types of content. So what can we learn from the data side of the experiences that we put out and the content that we put out? What can that tell us about how much people are engaged with the content and how they're not?
I think that's a really good point. I mean, Katie, I bet you've got loads of information like this sitting behind the organization you're part of because, I think data's great, but sometimes, as Gaynor said, we don't, it's what is that success metric? How are they measuring the success of their, say it's an employer bringing some training in, how are they measuring the success? What is that? Is it high retention rates or is it just they've completed the course?
I think that for data, it's actually quite personal to the business as well, because it depends on the business's strategy as to what data you're trying to track. L&D sometimes tracks completion as quite a blanket data
Mm.
tracking. But actually, for a company that care about innovation and experimentation, actually, are you tracking how many new projects come out after a certain learning initiative? If you're tracking collaboration, do you then track how many people attended from different departments to the training session? How many connections were then followed up on in certain ways? And you do that through contact or following up with those individuals. So I think there's so much data that we can harness, but it very much is linked to the strategic elements of the business. Equally saying that, there's so much data that is there. So for example, in my company, we have loads of data. We have loads of data of what engages people, data linked to performance, all of that stuff. But making sense of the data and marrying up those two elements of the business partnering of L&D to the company and the data that's available is still a bit tricky sometimes. I think we still
Yeah,
mismatch it sometimes. I don't know if you guys agree,
I
but
completely
it is
agree.
quite hard to find the balance of, okay, I've got all of this great data. I'm trying to solve this problem. Which bit of data do I need? Which bit of data will show me how people will engage the most? And I think that's also where we can role model and experiment and try and look at the data and not be afraid to fail and go, that did not do what we thought it would do. It did do this. That's great. Because there's always something that happens. But yeah, I would say, thank you for the props, Karen, of that we would have loads of data, and we do, but
Yeah.
still trying to marry some of that up sometimes.
Is it more like an inference sometimes of what you rather than a concrete A to B? Um, and I think I always think as well, sometimes there's this, we want to do an e-learning module, we want to do a course, whatever content, we want to create this content, but then I'm always the one asking awkward questions and saying, well, why do you want to do this? What do you want to get out of this? Because for me, you can't evaluate anything unless you know what you wanted to get out of it to
Yeah.
start with. And then it all starts to get a little bit fluffy, and I don't do fluffy. So it's like, so we can say that we wanted to, decrease errors in ordering processes or something, or I mean, it's that kind of, it's like we've run this course, so therefore if you're getting less errors and that's what we wanted to achieve, has this been successful? And it's not about L&D operating in a bubble, in a vacuum. And I think that's much less now. It's a case, it used to be, it was like almost like that order training we need you to create. And again, Laura, that comes back to what you're saying. It's that we want a 45-minute e-learning module to solve our problem without actually digging down to see, first of all, is it even a learning issue or a training issue to start with? And it might be part of that. And it's getting to the nitty-gritty of that to start with, I think, that's when we can create content. The best content I ever created was not technical at all. It was a little credit card size card, and it was on voicemail because nobody could remember the numbers for the voicemail. So it was like, do a training course on this, and it was like a little card, and people could put it into their wallet, and when they were out traveling and wanted to change their voicemail, they just got out their little card and just pressed the numbers. Job done. There was no learning course, no e-learning involved in it. And sometimes I think, and I don't know if you would agree with this, sometimes we tried to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
I
I think
love
you're
that
100 I
story.
think you're 100% right. I think some HR teams will look at learning and development as a sticking plaster rather than
Yeah.
actually really understand what's going on in the organization. My best friend, before she retired, was HR director for one of the biggest car retailers in the UK. And she used to say to me, Karen, we can't just fix staff problems with more training. What we need to do is engage with the staff and find out what's going to work for them. And I think, it's like when we go back to look at data, I was with some clients on Wednesday who I managed their social media for them. And if we went purely off the data, then their best performing post for March was a pancake race down the back of their offices. Did that actually generate any new clients? No, I doubt it. But actually, it's that relationship building piece that I think, is that I think data is incredibly interesting. And I think we can all geek out on it and that information, but it's how we then use that information, isn't it?
Yeah, I think connecting, as said, we've all said, it's that strategy piece of what problem are you trying to solve? Understand the problem that's trying to be solved, either by someone who's coming to you for support or just generally for the business, and finding the data that helps you look at that in perhaps a different way or supports those
Mm.
decisions. Laura, what about you? What's your experience of the data and content marrying up?
So as a learning designer, I mean, I'm obviously interested in how using e-learning to solve businesses' problems, but I'm also really interested in using that data to understand the learning experience itself and create better learning experiences next time. Sort of using it as a kind of digital body language. You don't get that classroom experience online, but maybe we can infer some things from how they've engaged with the content we've designed. So is there a particular time of day that they log on to learn? Are there particular bits of content that they don't engage with at all, or they skip over? Or are there videos that they rewatch? Do they rewatch constantly? Are there quiz questions that don't perform very well, or are too easy? So sort of I'm quite interested in the practical side of the data for applying it for my learning and design experience. I also have had direct experience of asking that question, what problem are you trying to solve, means that we don't end up creating an e-learning piece at all. Which is a difficult position to be in as a supplier of digital learning, but it's sort of pivoting then to a consultancy role, and
Yeah.
we're actually going to help you do something different, and it's not a piece of e-learning.
But then does that make you more of a trusted partner in some, rather than creating some e-learning that you know is going to fail, and then you don't then have that business with someone? It's like, maybe it's better to say, no, this isn't the right path
Yeah.
for this.
And this is why I keep coming back to this question, Katie, that you posed about how can we harness the freedom that the amount of content that there is offers. And I think it is that positioning learning design as consultancy, as performance consultancy, rather than content creation, for me is a really exciting space to be in. We really get to think more about human behavior, about learning science, and about performance, rather than, is this going to be a piece of video, or is this going to be a simulation?
I think you can also really harness the people who are already inside your company because of that. We have so many different things going on because it's a matrix organization. We have so many experts who've already made small bits of step by steps for themselves, or taught the person next to them how to do something. And so when we're in that discovery phase of what's the problem, sometimes, and I think that it's really great for L&D to embrace this as a business partner. My role is L&D business partner. And sometimes it's saying, actually, I think the person you need is blah, blah, blah. Or let's pull in this person because I think they've done something similar before. And you're actually kind of a touch point to make connections across the business rather than going, oh, great, no worries, we'll solve that for you. It's actually, it's also more strategic for us. We have a bit more time then. But even I've had someone who came to me saying they just want to work on their general communication skills. And yes, I can point them in lots of different directions. But sometimes it's also not being afraid to say, okay, look, like be more analytical yourself. Look on social media and see what their communication skills are. Be more analytical when you're looking at reels and kind of throwing it back to them, as well as perhaps leading them in certain directions of there's a social media influencer who I really rate as a communication specialist, who's on a variety of platforms, but it's nice because they're on Instagram as well, which I know that everyone's looking at in our company, as well as other platforms. So you can redirect them and let them take a bit of control and ownership. Not being afraid to refer to AI as well in that discovery session and saying, okay, well, actually for Excel, and I actually do this, guys, for Excel, I'm straight on ChatGPT, like, give me a step by step of how to move this column into this and do X,
I
Y,
know
and Z.
it.
I look
Yeah,
like an expert right now.
yeah.
Like, but it's not being afraid to actually signpost them in a different direction rather than having to come up with all the content and a whole training provider.
I'd love to hear a bit more about the user generated content side of what you produce, Katie, because I mean, I think that finding experts in the business who are already doing that work or already have an understanding of that subject is such a rich seam for learning content, and especially how that relates to what we see on social media, where in 30 seconds people really succinctly explain concepts to you before you've had a chance to scroll on, and sort of taking a little bit of that learning inwards into the business and saying this is what we can learn from what's going on content wise outside.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that our people are so great in the company I work at. They are really up for it, which is already one of the tricky parts to getting subject matter experts. Um, but I think that reaching out to not only to those people directly, but I reach out within our people department. I speak to the people partners who know so many people through the business and say, I want to do something on this. Do you know anyone who's quite good at X, Y, and Z? For example, the manager program that we're rolling out for this year is a bit more pick and mix, and it's got different topics, and the sessions are much smaller. But for pretty much each one, I'm speaking to a subject matter expert or someone who's got a really good experience that they can storytell and share to come in and be a part of that so that people can make their own connections and it's not a dictated step by step, here's some models, here's how you do it. It's here's some rich experiences, here's some models, take what you will. But also, Laura, I think the other thing that is a really useful part to do is really harnessing what you said about reels and different parts of that. We have a great comms department that use a lot of video. So we often have people speaking from inside the business, sharing what they took away from something, what they learned, sharing what they do on a day to day so people understand a bit more about different departments. And that's such a great way to create content in a way that people are very used to now and can be picked up and put down quite quickly.
I think we've got a generations coming through now that have got very short attention span. And really interesting, actually. I was reading something yesterday about video content, and LinkedIn's trying to be TikTok now with the way it's changing its video formats. But what was really interesting was the information I was reading was that they're trying to get us to create shorter videos, but it's also about how we frame that video. That if we don't catch people in those first 10 seconds, they're not going to stay and watch it, regardless of whether it's 10 minutes, 2 minutes. It doesn't matter. We've got to capture their attention with that hook. And I think on platforms like TikTok and Instagram, people will scroll much more fast on those platforms rather than actually stay. And so I do lives once a week, and people will be there for a period of time. But I think that's because the live is on LinkedIn, and you've just got to look at Netflix. Skip recap, skip intro. It's everybody wants everything faster now, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your experiences of we know that people like learning that relates to their role and they really understand the connection. But the experience of that in-demand learning especially with AI. As I just said, for Excel, I'm not going to go on a course. I'm going to type into ChatGPT, how do I do this? Give me a step by step. It's like a one up from how Google used to be. You know, when you're thinking of an actress who's in a movie you've just watched and you want to know their name, instead of trying to work that out and let it be a thought process, and you know, in 2 days' time, you'll come up with the answer, Google it. You Google it straight away. I was sitting next to someone in a cinema who got out their phone to Google who the actress was for a voice of an animated person in a film. And I was like, what are you doing? Can you not wait? But people
Yeah.
can't wait now. So uh, there's great advantages of it, where there's the people being able to really take control and find out what they need for Excel. But also, we're missing, and that's my question, are we missing opportunities for those connections to expand and be made slowly?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, back in the day, I used to run a course called Basic Mouse and Windows. I'm going back a long way, and it taught people how to do things like using the file structure in Microsoft Windows back in the day. And yeah, it feels like we've almost missed that whole part. I mean, if you asked, someone, maybe a younger person nowadays, and I'm saying this like I'm, ancient, but what's File Explorer? I mean, they would probably look at you like you were crazy. It's like it's almost like those foundations that we have. It's like we don't bother with that anymore. We just go straight to the nice bits, a bit like having your dessert before having your main course. And it's like if you can, yeah, you can just Google the little bits in Excel that you need, but then if you don't understand the sort of foundations below that, and sometimes you can be missing. You're not necessarily doing the right thing. I mean, a few years ago, someone created a huge document, and was like, how do I put a table of contents into it? I said, well, you just look at your style headings and do it from there. And they were like, what's the style heading? So they then had to go through 108 pages of document and add that because they didn't have that basic understanding of how that worked before progressing with the task. So maybe we're kind of doing things a little bit, backwards. Sometimes we don't have that sort of, not, you don't need a full depth of knowledge, but some kind of knowledge that rather than just this bite size learning is great, but I mean, that's probably a question. Do we need to have more foundations to it?
And how do we harness putting that in place if the landscape is such a focus of this new culture
And constantly changing.
and constantly changing? I mean, perhaps one of the things that we could do is helping employees be a bit more analytical of when they see um, an influencer talking about, I don't know, performance management on their Instagram, and being a bit more analytical of like, okay, that's
Yeah.
a great snippet. Does it relate to what I do? Does it relate to the place that I work, or my own type of culture and how I want to be as a manager? But also, is there anything else I need to know before I try and
Yeah.
put that in place?
But also, is it accurate? Because there's a lot of people who are experts out there who perhaps don't know very much themselves. So
Yeah.
we've been talking for 40 minutes. That only seems like about 10. So, yeah. So I think we're probably needing to start wrapping up now. Although I could carry on talking for ages, I have to say. Do we have any final thoughts? Who wants to start with some?
I think I from my perspective, from a social media perspective, I would say that um, there is so much information out there. Like we've used the word overwhelm, we're overloaded with information all the time. I have a 19-year-old who doesn't go anywhere without his phone, but he cannot remember what day of the week it is. And these are our future learners, God help us. But I think as people who work in learning and development, I think we have to be constantly, as Katie's put, as beautifully put, is we need to be questioning everything, thinking about what the outcome is this the best way to it and to do it, and as you said, Gaynor, is this the right solution at the right time for those people? And being curious. Curious is my word of the year, actually. I always say I'm curious. Why we're doing this. I'm not losing sight of that.
I know we're coming to the end, but you just talking about what does the individual need, just reminds me that there's a whole sphere of human-centered learning design that we didn't have a chance to discuss. But really making content that works for the individual and defining what that individual needs to do. But I think really my key takeaway is I'm going to go think about what I can unlearn this week, and celebrate that.
Yeah. Katie, what about you? You have final thoughts?
I feel that there is a lot of opportunity in letting go of managing the content, and that we also have to be very aware that the rate of change is just getting faster and faster and faster, but to also be aware of balancing that and taking people on that change journey. So even though content is changing and there's all the reels and everything, to take people on a journey with that, to introduce multiple touch points, not get rid of everything at once and move completely in a new direction, because I think we'll get whiplash with how many times we'll have to pivot. Being agile, but remembering that there needs to be a journey, there needs to be multiple touch points, communication to take people on that journey with us. And that's the way that L&D can really role model that change curve and technological change curve in the company as well.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, I agree with all of you. I think for me, my takeaway is that we don't forget about the basics. It's like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? What do we want to achieve? And who are our learners? There's no point in creating fabulous stuff for learners if they're going to be in an oil rig in the middle of the North Sea and don't have any Wi-Fi.
Yes. Little cards, little business cards of what you
Little
need.
business cards for everything.
Absolutely love it.
Super.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. It's been fabulous talking to you all.
Yeah, it's been really great insights and learnings to take away.
Thanks, Gaynor. Thanks, Laura. Katie.
What a great episode. And we'd love to know your thoughts, so please do let us know. When we finished, our guests felt the recording had gone really quickly and they hadn't covered everything that they wanted to. So, we've decided we're going to record part 2 later this year. And with the frightening expansion of AI content and tools, it seems appropriate and relevant. A very special thank you to Gaynor, Karen, Katie and Laura for their insights into this subject and for their time in making this such a brilliant recording. We know that you'll want to connect with them afterwards, and their details are, as usual, in the show notes, along with information about how to connect with us here at Women Talking About Learning. We're back, as usual, in a couple of weeks' time, and next time it's the Work-Life Balance one. As always, thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.